Okay, I think we're going to get started here. Hi, everybody. I'm Ian Withrow. I run product management at AppDynamics for all the end-user monitoring efforts. So that's the mobile, the browser, and now this new product I want to tell you about today, the synthetic monitoring solution. I'm actually pretty excited about this because before I came to AppDynamics, I worked at Keynote Systems for 4 years, which many of you may know is a big synthetic product. So I've been thinking and working on synthetic for about 6 years now. So this is kind of a cool moment for me. Synthetic itself, though, is a very old product space. What you see here is a picture from the Wayback Machine circa 1997 of Keynote's marketing page for its flagship web monitoring product. That's a long time ago. Obviously, marketing has evolved since this time, this big text blob page. But synthetic really hasn't changed a whole lot since the 90s. It's been 20 years, but it's still kind of been the same product. So in this talk, I'm going to kind of explore about why I think that's been. And while I will show you the product at the end, I really want to talk about how we built this product, because I think that will give you better insight into why this product is going to be different and more powerful in the industry. Just to kind of put this all in context, when synthetic grew up, you probably had dial-up as your home internet connection. So obviously things, technology should have changed a lot since then. Traditionally, this is how synthetic has been built. It's been bricks and bricks of cache, and then you turn those bricks of cache into servers, which you then deploy out into various data centers, so you manage hosting providers. It's a big operational intensive business. And it really forces the synthetic vendor to think about how they're going to manage and get a return on their capital. ROI is king. Back when I was at Keynote actually had a basement basement that just had stacks and stacks of these servers, and they had a team that just their job was to think about these things and ship them out and deliver them to the world. Kind of crazy. So the result of this kind of way of doing business is, you could pretty much have any frequency of data you want, provided it was 5 minutes or 15 minutes. Now, of course, over the years, things changed. Now they can do things like 30 minutes or every 1 hour, but it's still fairly limited. And there are many other ways that the nature of this kind of capital business has forced vendors to get customers to conform and basically be the same, even if they're not necessarily that's not necessarily the case. Also, this cost of entry basically created a really big barrier to entry. So you needed those stacks of cache to actually get into the synthetic space and compete with Keynote or Gomez's global network. Or you could start small. You could be a regional player and build up one kind of node at a time. Keynote had a term for those companies. They called them the ankle biters. And the problem with that model is it was really hard to get up to the scale that could really compete for a global business that needed monitoring from around the world. As you can imagine, when you have a monopoly or a duopoly, that's not exactly a recipe for innovation and change in the industry, though. So at AppDynamics, we sat down. We said, all right, let's build out a checklist of the things that we want to have to build the synthetic product of the future. We want to have compelling data that no one else has to help you monitor and understand user experience in ways that you never could before. We want to have it run on browsers that your users actually use. Imagine that. We heard from a lot of you that scripting was the suckiest thing about synthetic, that it's very painful to build and then maintain these scripts. And so we wanted to see what we could do about that. And then we know that we needed a global footprint day one. That wasn't something that we could then build up slowly over the years. That was a must-have table stakes requirement. And then naturally, whenever we launched a product at AppDynamics, this will be my third, we always look to combine the product together with the core APM and other services that AppDynamics offers. So you're not looking, it doesn't look like you have one siloed product that doesn't really have any relationship to the other services you bought from us. We want to have an integration there. So this is the goal, the high-level PRD that we had to set out and tackle. How are we going to do this? Well, fortunately, it's not the 90s anymore. We have great things like cloud computing. We've got web standards, open source technology. These things really didn't exist or were very nascent in the 90s. And I think these things are basically going to lower the barriers to entry for synthetic monitoring vendors substantially, not just us. So going forward, what I really like to see for this industry is that success is about innovation and execution, not how much capital you've invested into your network. As a PM, I aspire to keep customers because they want to use my products, not because they don't have any choice or because they're stuck. So let's talk about open source. So the first thing we're going to need is we're going to need an agent. So Synthetic is about taking a robotic agent, which you control as a customer, and telling it to go out and do some tests with you. The best agents do real browser testing. They don't do fake browsers because, for a variety of reasons, have reproducing user experience accurately to actually having an accurate replay of a script on your site. It requires a real browser. We knew this. Fortunately, the best real browser monitoring agent is open source. It's a product called WebPageTest. You may have heard of it. It's very popular with the front-end developer community. It lets you go out and do one-off ad hoc testing on a variety of different browsers. And it's maintained by Pat Meenan. He's a guy who works at Google. So it's got some serious horsepower behind it, this open source project. So that was pretty attractive to us. And here are a few more reasons why we thought this was the right agent choice. So first off, in the industry, it's standard, even for our own browser run product, to look at on-load time. That's when you look in the UI, that's what we call end-user response time. And on-load is basically the worst measure of user experience, except for all other measures that are available. It's kind of the devil we live with. And in fairness, we use it in our run product, as I mentioned. It's valuable. All the browsers support it. It's got some things to recommend it. But we said with Synthetic, we own the actual end-user device. Perhaps we can do better. And that's what WebPageTest let us do. So it has this feature called visual-based timings. What this means is that instead of measuring the network events or the browser events, what's going on under the covers, it can measure directly what the user sees. And so it can say, hey, what's the time to load everything above the fold? I don't care if there's third-party scripts calling out to Google, unless it blocks what loads above the fold, because that's what the user sees. So this is visual complete time. And then it has another cool feature called speed index. So this is, again, the time to load everything above the fold, but now it's trying to control for how fast you load things. So for example, if you have a site that loads everything that the user can see in 5 seconds, but it does all of that on the exact 5th second mark, that site is much slower from our perspective than a site that's gradually loading things continually over those 5 seconds. It completes at the same 5-second mark, but it's made continual progress. So speed index gives you points for loading more things faster. So these are great timings. We've basically taken the stance that these should be standard and the most important metrics that you look at from a performance monitoring perspective, and we think we're pretty unique in offering them. Let me give you a kind of a visual representation of why on-load doesn't work, if I can find my mouse. There we go. So here we're loading a page. It's timing. Boom, 3 seconds. It looks like it's done. But wait a minute. The clock is still ticking. What's that mean? Well, there's other things going on in this page. Still loading, still going. Oh. So with a traditional on-load-based, synthetic-based product, this page is slow. 14 seconds. That's pretty bad. However, if you look at it from the user perspective, this is a good website. It loads in a couple seconds. So this is why we think that visual-based timings are a better way to understand and benchmark your user experience. So this is the way we've highlighted as an example, a screenshot from the AppDynamics product. As you see here, we put visual-based timing up front and center on par with things like load time. And we do, of course, still collect on-load, because a lot of you are familiar with that from your current product. So we haven't totally tossed that out. But we want to make it obvious what the visual times are. There are others in there, too, like start render. That's an important metric that tells you when the page actually starts to do something. If you're sitting there staring at a blank screen on a website as a user, I'm going to navigate away and pick another website. It's important to quickly get out there and show me something. Where we have areas of the product UI where we can really just show you one number, we've picked the visual-based times. We've taken the choice to standardize on that as the most important metric for synthetic monitoring. WebPageTest has other benefits, though. Remember, we said we wanted to have really high-quality browser support. As you see on the left here, WebPageTest supports pretty much every version of IE that's been commercially released. It's got the latest versions of Firefox. It even has some wacky stuff like Safari on Windows. And then it has this cool kind of mobile Chrome feature that's in beta that we've been testing and evaluating as well. So WebPageTest, I mean, it's got you covered if there's a browser type you want. And you look at legacy vendors, I just heard good news from Gomez the other day, or I'm sorry, Dynatrace now. They just added IE11 support last 2 months ago in October. Now, if you looked at when IE was released, that was actually first came out in 2013. So good news, it takes 2 years, it seems, to add browser version support there. Obviously, with WebPageTest, because it's not just us building, maintaining it, we've got Google. They've got a lot of money resting on this project for their own internal things. We're going to be able to keep up with latest browsers much faster. Now, I'd be remiss if I said that, day one when Edge comes out, we're going to have it going. But I think with this approach, we're going to be able to get to new things like that much quicker. Other kind of gotchas, if you look at the other vendor products, very often it's got Chrome, but it's not quite the latest version of Chrome. There's some reason why they haven't been able to get up to that. So a lot of challenges when you're building your own agent that we're going to basically be avoided. Now, obviously, we're not going to offer every agent version under the sun day one. We're going with IE, Firefox, and Chrome. But where that extensive browser support is going to be really powerful is when we get into on-premise agents. That's something many of you have asked about, and that will be something we'll be doing next. And there it will be really cool because if you've got an internal call center that's running IE8 or IE7 or, heaven forbid, IE6, we have an agent platform that actually understands those browsers and can work. So what this means is that adding new agents, it's not a fundamental 2-year engineering R&D project. It's really primarily a testing and certification effort. So the time to market is going to be much faster to add new agent technology. And fortunately, with Google and the other independent developers, it's not just going to be you. You're not going to be an early adopter of this new agent. Lots of people will be using that, and you can be confident data quality will be good. So let's talk about more WebPageTest benefits. There are many other features that this agent technology that we don't quite yet use, but are already built and ready to go that we can adapt into the product. So you remember that film strip I showed you earlier? That's a pretty cool feature. Wouldn't it be nice to have that in your snapshots? That's a feature that we can basically integrate and build into the product. We're not going to do it day one, but the line of sight for us to build that kind of technology is quite short. There's other cool things like they've got this connection usage view you're looking at here. Basically, it's looking at your different sockets and understanding how they're being filled and if you've effectively sequenced the resources on your page. We're evaluating that. That looks pretty neat. I wonder if we'll really need this with HTTP2 or not, but if there's demand from customers, this is something we can add in. That's the important thing to understand is we react to customer needs, and we have a platform that already has cool features lined up, ready to go. Now, WebPageTest is not perfect. There does have one large feature gap, and that's scripting. Now, if you're familiar with the project, it does actually have a scripting engine in it. It's just not a very good one. Even the developer himself said he really wished that he could have time to integrate it with something like Selenium and write WebPageTest with Selenium. And we know that scripts are important to our customers. This is a survey we did with Dimensional Research, and we found that almost all customer visits to your websites are at least going to have 4 different pages that are looked at, possibly many more. So scripting, that's a must-have feature for Synthetic. However, if you've ever done and worked with scripting, you've probably felt this way at some point in your career. And the reason for this is while most vendors, they offer you a graphical-based recorder, which gives you a good start with scripting. But inevitably, the recorder doesn't quite get you all the way. It's not going to work for every page. It's not going to work every time. And you're going to have to go into their bare metal scripting and do some coding and try and get it to work. And once you're there, now you're working with a proprietary tool. There isn't much documentation on the internet. You may not be familiar with that. APIs are not going to be nearly as user-friendly as you've come to expect. And it's just going to be rough. And by the way, when you switch vendors, you're going to have to learn that all over again. So that's probably painful. And personally, I kind of, feel that proprietary scripting is kind of a sneaky way of vendor lock-in, right? They've thrown up this barrier, this switching cost for you to leave and go to another vendor because you've invested in all these scripts. As a PM, that's painful for me because that's not the customer loyalty we aspire to at AppDynamics. We want you to stay because you like us, not because you're stuck with us. Fortunately, web standards, I think we've got a solution there. So the W3C, that's the standards body that defines how web browsers are supposed to behave and what features they offer. They have this thing called WebDriver. And that's an API that basically lets you drive a web browser from the console or from a program. That sounds exactly like what we need. And while you may not have heard of WebDriver, it's a good chance that somebody in your organization has heard of Selenium. And Selenium 2 is the most popular, successful implementation of WebDriver. It's basically dominated the pre-prod QA market. So this is what we said, all right, Google, they thought that this was the right fit for Selenium. This seems to be a standards-based approach. Let's see what the benefits are for doing Selenium scripting. Well, first off, Selenium scripts are easier. Now, I chose that word very deliberately. I'm not going to try and tell you that Selenium scripts are always going to be easy, but they're definitely easier than a proprietary language. And that's because if you run into a problem, you can go out and Google a solution, and there will be an answer on Stack Overflow. There's a large, established ecosystem. There's great products out there like Selenium Builder. So if you want a graphical recorder to get you started on the script, that's a tool another vendor has developed. There's just lots out there once you go to an open source ecosystem like this that will ease your life. Selenium is a skill set that people put on their resumes. If you need to hire for this talent, you can do it. And in fact, there's probably already somebody in your organization, probably in the pre-prod part of the world, who has this skill set and may have even written some Selenium scripts before. Speaking of which, the best script is the script that you don't have to write yourself. So we think that going with Selenium is going to make things like continuous integration pretty cool. One of the features we'll have at GA is an API. So you can actually push a repo of scripts up to our system. And you can do this continually whenever you have a release. So you have some QA developers. One of their tasks when they do a release is they write scripts. You can take those scripts and then sync them to your synthetic monitoring with AppDynamics. And now you're less likely to have breakage once you push a release. I've known from experience that's one of the times that synthetic scripting is likely to go awry and give you that punch through the screen moment with your computer. So now we think we have the best agent. It's solved the key problem with scripting. But we need to build a network because it's no good unless we can put these around the world and let you monitor your website from where users are. So how should we do this? Should we go out? Should I go tell Jyoti he needs to get millions of more dollars from our investors so we can buy capital? Or should we start slow? Wait a minute. This is not the 90s. What about the cloud? Maybe we can look at using that. Well, actually, even a couple years ago, the cloud probably wouldn't have been an option. And that's because the Amazon model basically dominated the industry. And while you may believe that Amazon or Azure or Google are a better cloud, it doesn't matter. But those guys basically all put their data centers in the same place. And so if you really wanted a geodiverse network, you really couldn't go and say, oh, I'll match up Amazon with Azure and have discrete footprint. They're actually in the same cities sometimes. And what synthetic really needs is capillaries, not arteries. That's changed, though, over the last year. Geo-distributed infrastructure as a service is here. We found there's two models in the marketplace. One is the owned and operated model. That's IBM Software. So they're building out their own proprietary nodes around the world. And the other is the federated model with ComputeNext. And that's where traditional hosting providers have realized, oh, wow, this cloud thing, it's not going away. Nobody's buying that virtual private cloud is a cloud-based solution that does not bring in the customers. I need API-driven based infrastructure as a service, but that's not something I can do. It's just not my DNA. It's not my skill set. But what they can do now is they can join ComputeNext, and they basically provide those services. The hosting provider provides the infrastructure, and together it looks like one cohesive network, even though the individual data centers can be owned by different people. So we are on board with both models. We want both to thrive and succeed. And let's take a kind of visual look at what this means. So on the left here, you're going to see this is the coverage we would have had if we just used Amazon, like one of our competitors. And then on the right, this is the coverage you see that we believe we can get to around GA with the combination of Amazon, SoftLayer, and Compunex. And just visually, you can tell this is a much broader coverage you have in North America. Similar in Europe, you can go from 2 locations to 11 locations. Really good coverage. And even in Asia-Pac, where things like cloud have been, that tend to be later adopters of some of these technologies, you can get from 3 locations to 5 locations. And the good news is this is really just the beginning. All these vendors have roadmap for locations, and because it's API-driven deployment, once they bring out a new site, we basically just have to test it out, and we can start pushing agents and add that to the provisioning screen that you see in the UI. So this means really fast adoption, and it's just basically growing organically without effort or an investment from AppDynamics. There's another benefit to the cloud, and that's flexibility. So, when your time to scale is hours or even minutes instead of weeks or months, you can do a lot of cool features. So you can do things like, hey, if you're a customer and you want to run every minute from 3 to 5 in the morning, and that's just what your application needs, you got it. We can do you. And while it may be possible for a capital-based solution to offer that kind of UI, you get too many customers like that with capital, and it's going to bust your model. You're going to be unprofitable. So it's very difficult without the ability to scale up, but also more importantly, to scale down when we don't need capacity. We can also do other kind of cool features like retests on failure. This is a common ask in the synthetic space. It's basically the traditional model for alerting is, hey, when you see a problem, and these networks burp all the time, you don't want to alert after one failure. So the traditional vendor model is to say, okay, just measure from more locations. Remember, you can only do it every 5 or 15 minutes, so you got to do more locations to get more data. And then eventually one of those other locations will come around and verify the problem, although that may be from a totally different geo, so is that really a good verification? So the right approach, we decided, was no, you don't have to do artificial things with frequency or locations. What we're going to do is when we see a failure, we'll immediately launch another test from the same spot. And then if that fails, then we'll send you an alert. And that's a far fewer reports of errors that aren't correct. And it doesn't give you this time to alert that's basically based on when the next agent test is going to come around. It's much faster. So that's pretty cool. But again, if you have lots of customers doing these retests, maybe the internet has a problem, you're going to need to be able to add up capacity in order to handle that load. And so again, this is another feature you can do with a cloud-based model. All right, so we're in pretty good shape here. Now let's talk about integration. So day one, as you would expect, synthetic is going to be integrated with the backend. This is a screenshot of a synthetic script journey, and you can see there's links to business transactions for individual resources. There will be a tab there that gives you a list of all the BTs that are correlated with this particular page. Great. Many of you got value out of this kind of feature for our browser run product. We know you would expect us to do this day one. So that's cool. And if you're curious to know more about this, I encourage you to check out Al Kemner's Breaking the News session right after this. That's actually a customer who's been using this product with some success. So it'd be kind of cool to hear it from him. Let's look at what the future could hold, though. So we've got traffic coming to your site. You could monitor that with our browser root user monitoring product. And one of the new features we're bringing in the next release is this sessions capability. So that's basically a real user script, the user journey through the site. What if, in the future, we could analyze the different paths users took and then generated Selenium scripts based on that? That would be pretty cool. Now you're basically generating scripts based on the user traffic. You're not handwriting them yourselves all the time. How can we leverage this kind of platform? Well, the first idea is that this can make setup a heck of a lot easier. Now, what you see here in the design world is called a desire line. The best, despite your best efforts to lay the sidewalks where people want to go, people walking through your park, they're going to go where they need to get to, and they're going to wear a path a dirt path into the grass eventually. Users inevitably are going to use your web applications in the same way. They're going to do it in ways you didn't anticipate, you didn't expect. We encounter this all the time. And this is the problem of trying to anticipate upfront with scripting. So with this rum to script feature, we could basically tell you not just here's a bunch of scripts that accurately reflect what the users did. We can actually tell you how much coverage you have with your synthetic setup based on what users are doing and what you've elected to monitor. And then if you need to add coverage to your synthetic, you can do things like say, hey, click on this path to generate a job. And then that job can be from locations that users typically visit. It can come at times when users are or are not active. It can be using the types of browsers that users like. There's no more guesswork. We can just tell you the facts. These are the way the users behave, and here's how you set up your synthetic to match what they do. All right, so that's a pretty promising idea. I like that. Let's see if we can do better, though. What if we could do that automatically? So that's not a setup process. Instead of manually creating jobs, what if you could just get a set of rules? You could tell us, hey, I want to cover what 80% of my users do. Go out and provision the synthetic frequency and test in order to give me that coverage. What if you could do things like say, hey, you know, if I see a problem with a business transaction, let's go make sure we have some synthetic tests on that so that we have that data when it comes time to troubleshoot it in the war room. Or what if I could set up rules that say, hey, whenever I see users drop off some of my critical paths, let's spin up more synthetic load to cover the gap. These are kind of cool ways now that synthetic is working together with your user traffic in order to give you a complete picture and coverage. And the nice thing about it is you're setting up these rules and configuring them such that it's kind of taken some of the pain away. So that'd be a pretty cool thing we could do. But I think I got one idea that's probably even cooler. Traditionally, you're going to go from pre-prod to production with your synthetic scripting. But what if you could complete the circle? I mean, how many times have you had an issue that had up in your website and the QA team just didn't have the foresight to test that? What if your pre-prod test cases were actually populated by your real user behavior? That would make regression testing so much more effective, and that would ultimately reduce burden on the QA team because now they're not defining all these scripts. They're free to focus on new features that aren't released. And you know you've got good coverage for corner cases. That would be really cool. Now, obviously, it's going to take us some time to work up to some of these things. But as you can see, we've got some really promising ideas for the future about how we can make scripting not just painful, but kind of awesome if you use a couple AppDynamics products. So let's put it all together here. We've got visual-based metrics. So now you can benchmark user experience based on what users actually see, which is the most relevant measure. You can run it on Chrome, IE, and Firefox versions. They're all the current and latest popular ones. You've got scripting with Selenium, so that can reduce the pain of setting up scripts using standards. And then thanks to the cloud, we can have a global infrastructure. It can do cool things like retest on failure that people have wanted for a long time. And last but not least, we're going to have integration with the backend product day one. And we've got a cool kind of future vision of how we can do even more integration from there. So what I want to do now, for a few minutes, I want to go ahead and kind of show you a demo of the synthetic beta that we have running right now. Okay, so this may be a little bit different from what you're used to seeing because this is the 4.2 UI. It's not the latest 4.1 you're seeing in production. So what you see here on the left nav is you have a less nav right now that's all about end user experience because we're looking at an end user front end app. And so there's information about browsers, real users, and then right now we're here in the synthetic section. So synthetic basically has a sequence of jobs. These are jobs, these are tasks that you want users to go out and do. So let's look at Golden Goose. That's the money that's where the money is coming on our little website here. And in Golden Goose, you see that a job is basically a script that we run. So we're going to this URL, and then we are making sure that 500 error doesn't return. So that's what we call an insertion. We've picked some browsers we want to run on, some locations. And then we've picked the frequency that we want to test. I've got it set to the standard 15 minutes, but if I wanted to go down to 14 minutes, that's what's right for me with my budget. I can do that. If I want to bump it up to every 45 minutes, I can do that with a push of a button. I can pick what days of the weeks I want to run, and even what times of the day that I want these tests to be done. Then I can go in and configure alerting. So one of the things I might want to do here is set up an alert on visually complete time. Sounds good. Let's make sure that's under 5 seconds. And then, maybe I don't want to fail after the first failure. I could fail after a sequence, maybe 2, 3, or 5. Or I can just have it immediately retest after I have an issue, as we were talking about before. The last kind of cool feature we have in this setup here is you can pick your connection speed. So, people often say, hey, I really want to do a test that's at the same performance of actual user. So we've got some cool presets here. I could pick out cable modem, or if I wanted to do a custom one and build my own, I can do that too. So these are all things that are within your power to set up when you're creating a synthetic job. All right, so we got this guy running. Let's go ahead and look at some data. So we're loading up here. So it looks like we did have some burps over the past 4 hours with my availability. Things seem to be coming up and going. So that might be an issue. I could go down here and look at the distribution of performance too. Maybe there's a performance problem. If I just wanted to look at slow sessions, I can just drag and drop there. And boom, all that data reloads. And now I'm just looking at sessions that were particularly slow from my distribution curve. But it doesn't look like those were the ones that were causing the availability issues. They're slow sessions. Let's flag that as something we want to look at in the future, but that's not causing the immediate pain. So I'm going to delete that filter, turn that off. Let's keep looking here. Let's keep looking. Now let's look at our jobs here. And it seems like we've got 3 jobs running this test. We have Homepage, AppDynamics, and Golden Goose. But it looks like all the failures are coming on Golden Goose. So let's drill in and focus on them. And then we notice that most of the failures are coming on IE. So let's focus on IE for now. And then we don't want normal sessions that were fine. Let's just look at ones that had a test script assertion failed. And by the way, if there are other error types, they would show up here. All right, so now we have a pretty narrow view of what we want to look at. That was pretty quick and easy. Let's go look at some data points. All right, so we'll pop over here, open this guy up, and now because we have a runtime on these agents, we can actually get the console report on what happened. And obviously, I get that this is going to be really hard to read, so I'm going to read it for you. But it basically says on line 4, assert 500 is not in the page source, failed. So what that says to me is that there might have been a 500 error on this page. That's bad. And yep, lo and behold, it seems like we got a 500 error in trying to fetch this page. I've got a transaction snapshot linking to the back end. Let's click on that and see what happened. Yep, and sure enough, it looks like the server returned an error code 500. And you know the product from here. I could drill down and find the root cause. So now I'm solving problems with style and speed. Of course, we have the full waterfall too. So if this was a front-end problem, maybe some sort of asset was loading slow and pushing out visual complete time, that's another thing I could easily spot in this view. Great. I think I showed you what I want to show real quick today. So let's pop up in here, back into my slides. So I hope you're excited like me about this. This is really going to be cool. We're going to make life better for a lot of customers with this product. We're doing a special promotion to kind of kickstart this. Basically, the first 10 customers we get in North America, Europe, and the first 5 rest of the world, we've got a special price with very reasonable minimum purchases. We're going to have 2 days free of professional services to help get you started. We know that you probably have some legacy scripts that you're looking to get off of, and so this can be an asset you can use to help you do that. And then we'll be setting up some virtual user groups for early adopters so they can share best practices and learn about that. So if you're interested about this and you're curious, maybe you have some extra budget to spend before the year's up, please contact your sales and they'll help you take a look at this. Now I think I have some time for questions. Yes?
The visual complete time, sorry if I missed this, but what's it based on the resolution?
Oh, okay. The question is, what resolution is visual complete time based on? That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head, but we can answer that. I don't know. Our dev manager is sitting in the front row. I don't know if he knows off the top of his head.
Off the top of my head, I that would be different if you
Yeah.
desktop or mobile.
That's a feature that is configurable in WebPageTest. So, I think we'll pick some standard starting out that seems reasonable to people. And if you wanted to basically customize that, eventually we could expose that in the job creation API. So that's one of the cool things about WebPageTest is we got all this power. We just have to figure out what's the priority to harness. Thanks for that. A question over there. Yes, the question was for places like Africa or Middle East, what's the plan for locations in other parts of the world? Or South America is actually one I get a lot as well. We do have one in South America, but that's it. So obviously, we've focused on cloud-based infrastructure, so we need cloud-based providers in those regions. The way we're going about that is we're trying to introduce hosting providers to our partner CompuNext and helping them to see the value of joining that federated cloud. Because with you, a customer ready to buy, we can basically already guarantee them some initial business. And once they're in the CompuNext federated cloud, they're discoverable by other potential customers. So we hope to kind of change the thinking of some of those hosting providers and change the market that way. Question here.
Yeah, on the same line of thinking, is it on the roadmap to let the customers provide a point of presence of their own?
Yes, yeah. So one of the cool things with WebPageTest is it's an open source project. We plan, that's the next thing we'll be working on, is a on-premise version of that you can go and install. Then you can kind of pick what browser you want to deploy in each agent. And so we know that that's something a lot of people want. You have internal applications that they want to monitor, call center applications. There's tons of use cases for internal stuff. In my mind, I actually almost think of that as like an entirely different market segment. So like there's the Keynote and the Dynatrace market segment, which is what we have kind of day one. And then there's kind of the HBBSM, SolarWinds kind of type market that we'll be going after next. So that's as soon as Dev is finished getting this release out the door, they'll be kicking off that project. Please.
Do you have a feature in there for, say, planned outage, alert suppression, SLA reporting?
I want to make sure I heard you correctly. So I believe the question was, do we have a feature for SLA reporting and what suppression?
Alert suppression.
Alert suppression. Yeah, so we're using the standard AppDynamics platform for policy and legend. We didn't build our own. So all the capabilities about controlling actions and events, and as richness is added to that, we'll be able to take advantage of that automatically. From an SLA reporting, we will have reports with our custom dash feature. We have APIs up front. I'll be up front. We don't have like canned SLA reports day one. We had to pick something to not make the train, and that was it. But we have ways with our team to help you get the reports and the data out of the system you need, and you will see reports come along from us eventually. There's a question there. Yeah, the question is, do we have plans to monitor APIs? So it is possible with a browser to do some API monitoring. It's definitely not using the perfect tool for the job. So depending on your API, you could do some monitoring with us. And one of the benefits of our model, it's based on time you consume. APIs are fairly quick to return, so that can make them quite economical with how we're selling the product. But we definitely are looking to think about how we can do more direct API monitoring. So I see another agent in our future. I can't talk about time frame though yet. Other questions? I see one hands. It's kind of bright if you're in the back. Okay. Let me make sure I got the question correct. So I believe you're asking, how can you make sure you're checking specific nodes in a cluster? So I have multiple web servers. I want to hit a particular web server. Generally speaking, yeah.
You land, for example, one is supposedly you check only one server.
Mm-hmm.
Another
Yeah, it's tricky from an external monitoring solution because, I mean, that's the whole idea of the cluster is the user doesn't decide which server they hit. That's the job of the infrastructure. I've seen this work two ways in practice in the industry. One way is you basically have kind of a backdoor, right, where you have a specific URL. It's not, it's like the IP of that particular node, and then you can kind of rotate through those. You could define a script that basically round robins through those. Because you're just writing a Python script here, so you can pick that. Another way is once we have the on-premise agents, is you can put one in your data center and then point it directly.
But in this case, it's possible to aggregate all this in the same view. For example, that's actually the entire view that
Mm-hmm.
all server that will serve one view.
Yes. So the nice thing about that visualize UI I was showing you earlier is by default, you're looking at all your data together. And you notice I picked a specific job at one point, but one of the things you can do is pick a list of jobs. So like if you had a list of jobs that touch this page, the first one touches node 1, 2, 3, you could get a view that combines those, and then you would visually see, oh, the availability of 1 and 2 is good, but availability of 3 is poor. I can drill down on that one. So I think the product, if you can get to the point where you have basically a direct path for our browser to test, you can have that visibility really nicely there. Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. Oh, where you see a question? There. Thank you. Yeah, that's one of our future ideas. Let me repeat the question. The question is, I showed earlier that I looked at a transaction snapshot that was generating 500 error that was causing a problem that Synthetic tested. Is there a way that I can basically then create scripts that when I see failures in a BT, go out and touch that? So that's a future idea that we have in mind. And once we've integrated real user sessions and have the ability to basically turn those into synthetic scripts, that is the kind of the platform foundation we need to build, and then we can start doing kind of cool features like that. So that's in our thinking. We want to do that in the future. I think there's a question back there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to jump. The question is, are we doing monitoring steps that log into an app, checks if something is there, process based on the response contents? I realized the demo I gave, while it did have a script, it wasn't the most compelling illustration of that capability. So I want to go back to the demo real quick and just show that, if it will let me. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to a different account here. E-commerce. All right, so let's go to the show me the money. So here what I'm doing exactly that. I'm navigating, step 1, to a particular URL, and then I go and I log in. So I found the CSS space that's for username and password, and I submit. Then I go to the cart, the shopping page, and I add a couple things to the shopping cart. Then I click on the Buy Now button, and then on that page, I know it should say order IDs for your order. If I don't get that, that's a problem. So I'm asserting that must happen. If this ever doesn't return that space, this will fail, now show up as one of those assertion errors, and it'll hit your availability number. So key thing, complex scripting, definitely very possible with Selenium. Question.
About the APM integration, do you do things like when you kick off a synthetic test, does it set a particular transaction ID in APM, or is it built a snapshot of that transaction?
Good, great question, yeah. So the question is, hey, transaction snapshots, you don't always get them, right? And there's an important reason for that. It would be too much overhead to collect them every time in production. So how do you ensure there's a transaction snapshot for synthetic? That's only a small part of your load. Wouldn't it be nice to have that? And so the answer is yes. We basically have a way of telling the server agent, hey, I'm synthetic. You should try and take a transaction snapshot for me. And basically the server agent will do it unless it's got some other back-off rules going on in place, yeah. Great question. There.
So let's say if I want to emulate the user experience in terms of users get to our site, some of them via post and others via GIF. And some have the data, let's say, in the URL while others translate in the table.
Yeah.
Can I emulate that with the scripts?
Yeah, all right, so the question, we're back on API topics. So if I'm issuing, some APIs are GETs, some are posts, right?
It's not API, it's just a regular website.
Website, yeah. So the question is, can I look at the response contents and basically make a decision? Yeah.
More like if I want to initiate the complex website, I have to pass from page to page, but in order to arrive at the invocation of the initial page, some of it is via GIF, the others is via post. Can I just, do I have to create two separate versions of the script and specify, where can I, in the script, specify, let's say, GIF or post?
I think I'm going to ask you to come and hang out with us in the dev lounge, and we can talk through kind of the scripting use case in more detail. It's a fairly specific one, and I'm not sure I'm getting all the nuance of your question here, if that's okay. Other questions? Okay. Thank you so much for coming. I know you had choices, so appreciate it.